It's May 17th, 2016. Welcome to Raging Chicken Radio's Out the Coop podcast. Each week we check in with our Capitol correspondent, Sean Kitchen, on the good, the bad, and the ugly that is Harrisburg, PA. We're now on iTunes, on Stitcher, on Podbean, on Google Music. So subscribe to our podcast and give us some feedback. Raging Chicken Radio is a project of Raging Chicken Press. And check out all our citizen journalism over at ragingchickenpress.org. And if you like what you see, click on the support and membership tab and become a member for as little as $5 a month. So also, if you are interested in contributing to Raging Chicken Press as a writer, a videographer, a podcaster, just drop us a line, drop us an email at ragingchickenpress@gmail.com or send us a direct message on Twitter. We're at RC Press on Twitter. We began Raging Chicken Press almost 5 years ago to provide a platform for homegrown progressive citizen journalism and media activism. So if you got something to say, you just want to learn how to do this work, just drop us an email at ragingchickenpress@gmail.com and let's get started. So it's Tuesday in a presidential year, and that must mean that it's another primary day. Woohoo! So while the Republican contest is over and we got Donald Trump, right, today there's two key primaries in Oregon and Kentucky. These two primaries would be a significant test for the Bernie Sanders campaign to see if he can keep his narrow path to the nomination. And today's primaries come on the heels of a Nevada Democratic Party nomination convention that was filled with conflict, physical conflict in some cases, only intensifying the tensions between the Sanders and the Clinton campaign. So it got pretty crazy out there in Nevada. So we'll also take a look at the latest round of attacks on teachers in Pennsylvania. Sean's going to give us the skinny on a bill that would eliminate seniority as a consideration when laying off teachers. So Sean, man, how are you today?
Awesome. How are you?
Hey, man, I'm headed. So I'm great today. I'm really excited, even though I've got a full plate ahead of me. It's a big day. It's a big day. It's a big day because we've got a big announcement here for the podcast. So we've been talking about
big day. Really big day.
Big, huge. It's tremendous. It's a great day. This podcast, it's a great thing. It's great. It's tremendous. It's big. It's huge, right? So no, we do have
greatest thing since sliced bread.
It's since sliced bread, exactly, right? But we do have a big announcement here. We've been talking about this for the past couple of weeks, but today we will officially roll out our expanded podcast. Yes, you got it. So you guys may have heard of Steve Horn. Steve Horn, he writes over at the DeSmogBlog. Well, Steve Horn, you stay tuned after we finish the Out the Coop portion of today's podcast, right? We're going to keep on going. We'll have a break, and then we're going to take an interview with Steve Horn. And Steve Horn's going to be talking a little bit about the ExxonMobil probe that's being led by New York State Attorney General Eric Schneiderman, and he's going to really specifically looking at this the lawyer that was hired to kind of defend ExxonMobil here and his ties to the tobacco industry and the kind of NFL probes on concussions and Deflategate of all things. So check that out; it's going to be really cool. So make sure you stay tuned after Out the Coop. If you're subscribed to the podcast, it'll just keep on rolling. You can also go to our Podbean site and you can actually download the interview separately too as well after today. So we'd also like to welcome back Julia Scheib. She is a member of Lancaster 15 Now, and she's covering the Verizon strike. If you've been over at ragingchickenpress.org, you'll see that she just wrote a piece a couple days ago on the Verizon strike. She went out and interviewed a bunch of workers. Her latest piece is just up and now on Raging Chicken Press called Verizon Workers Talk About What It's Like to Strike. That's up on Raging Chicken Press, so please go over and check that out and kind of let her know that you're kind of checking it out, that you're checking out her stuff. Her first post got like, it's like thousands and thousands of people checking it out and sharing it around. So she does some great work. So give Julia some love. All right. So Sean, other than the great news here, right? We've got this crazy scenario that Pennsylvania is now finding new ways to kind of go after teachers. Going after teachers in ways that don't really seem like they're going after teachers, but it's going after teachers nonetheless. So give us a little breakdown of what's going on.
It's protecting excellent teachers. Kevin,
the bill is the Protecting Excellent Teaching Act. Is that right? Or Teachers Act? Is that what this thing is actually called?
I think so. But really, it's not protecting teachers. It's just a way to break teachers' unions. This bill would get rid of seniority as a way of and would allow school districts to lay off teachers who have been teaching for 25 or 30 years. And it's a way of attacking tenure rights. I'm sure you know a lot more about tenure than I do since you are a professor at Kutztown University. But the way they're using this draconian, or it's really like Orwellian language, Protecting Excellent Teachers Act. It was voted in the House last June, so almost a year ago. And when the Senate did nothing for the past month and a half, one of the first actions they took from their little primary vacation, where most of these people went unopposed, we should say.
Yep.
Their primary vacation, the first thing that they did when they came back is that they voted on the House bill 804, and they sent it back to the House, where the House has to pick it up for concurrence. Governor Wolf has vowed to veto the bill as soon as it gets to his desk. But there is one thing: a couple of the newspapers are supporting this bill, saying that Governor Wolf should sign this. One of those newspapers is PennLive, Patriot-News from Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, and they see it as a way as Governor Wolf not kowtowing to his big union donors and supposedly giving an olive branch or doing what's right for the state with the upcoming budget talks. I could find that to be completely bullshit.
Yeah.
Just call it out what it is right now, because seniority is part of that three-legged stool that unions fought for over the past 150 years, along with the 8-hour workday and a fair day's wage. So, you get rid of seniority, you're really attacking the heart of the union movement, and it's foolishness for these news organizations to come out and do this, because this isn't something that is a benefit. This is something that people fought and died for.
No, that's absolutely right. And what's so incredibly, I don't even know the words for it, but underhanded is a kind word for it. What's so underhanded about this bill, right? Again, you start with the name, right? The Protecting Excellent Teachers Act, as the idea that it puts in people's head the idea that seniority, right, basically protects bad teachers, right, and prevents good teachers from staying. Right. So what this bill actually, from my understanding of, you can correct me if I'm wrong, what this basically wants to do is it wants to eliminate seniority as a consideration when they're laying off teachers. So that, and even going from year to year for renewal and that kind of stuff. And they're using a teacher evaluation method that Tom Corbett put in place, right, that really doesn't even look at teaching observations, but it considers a bunch of other stuff, right, as kind of part of what determines that this is a good teacher.
Like test scores, right?
Right.
As one of them?
Exactly. So you're basically, what you're doing is you're kind of extending the standardized testing model into teachers' evaluation, and you're basically, that's going to be determinant of whether or not these teachers get renewed.
So what you're telling me is they're using test scores for this. So in school districts like Philadelphia, where you have 10,000, 15,000 unionized teachers, they're teaching in a school district that is severely underfunded. They have textbooks that are 10, 15, 20 years outdated. Mm-hmm. They have schools without running water. They have schools without, maybe there's like holes in the ceilings, there's holes in the walls and the elements are getting in. There's all this stuff going on in the Philadelphia school district. I think a boiler exploded earlier this year, almost killing an SEIU member and severely injuring another one. Mm-hmm. But these two union members saved the lives of a lot of children because they actually jumped into the as about to blow up in the building, and they actually prevented it from being a catastrophe. This boiler was, I think, like 2 years away from its end of life period, so there's really a lot of outdated infrastructure. This is just some of the stuff the Philadelphia school district's dealing with, the lack of funds going into the actual classrooms and into the physical properties, and we want to have those type of things determine whether or not you should lay off teachers who have been working in that school district for 20 years. Am I getting this right? That's what it seems like.
That's right. And I think that that focus on the boiler is actually a good example, because what it's drawing people's attention, this bill is drawing people's attention away from the actual working conditions, the actual learning conditions in these schools, right? The fact that the schools are falling apart, the fact that the funds have been cut so badly, that, there's not the proper materials in there, is distracting it from those things, right? Which again, cost money, would have to make hard choices, and then turning it over and focus solely on the teacher. So now it's all on the teacher's back again.
It's a teacher's fault.
That's right. It's a teacher's fault.
It's a teacher's fault that the boiler exploded. And I really wish that people would actually try to bring it. I would love to see what these debates are like inside these editorial newsrooms, because it would just be interesting to see how this goes, how these debates come up, because I would like to know if any of these points were even considered. This is not extending an olive branch out to the Republicans. This is gutting. This is chopping off a leg of the union movement.
Well, and it's also, frankly, go ahead.
I know. And as a news organization, you are coming out and you are supporting going back on 150 years of fight and struggle just to even get a head up in this society.
Right, but I think we also should be clear about what we're talking about too, because that kind of endorsement and that kind of language is also dumbs down our political discourse. So let me tell you why. Right, you mentioned before, it's like, because I know about tenure because I'm involved, because I'm a tenured faculty member at Kutztown University, but tenure works in a similar way at K through 12. But let me just kind of break this down a little bit about some of the failings of our political discourse around this issue right now. So basically, everybody wants to, these people who are proposing this bill, and I think like Ryan Almond, right, the senator from Lancaster, has been out front on this one. He's been kind of quoted all over the place, right? He's basically saying that again, it's about these teachers who are, the only reason they still have a job is because they have tenure and they have seniority, so you can't get rid of them. First of all, tenure is not a guaranteed job for life, right? This is one of the big, it's a lazy determination. It's lazy to say that. What all tenure is it guarantees due process to firing. So in other words, if you want to get rid of somebody, right, because they have unpopular views, because they, for example, they think standardized testing regimes that we have are dangerous and harmful to children, right? If they think those and they speak out about those things, those teachers are protected, right? So it's not only like, again, what's his name here? Is it David Broderick? He's a spokesman for PSEA. He was quoted in a recent article by what do you call it? The Post. He was Post-Gazette. He was quoted in a recent article basically saying, look, the time in the classroom, the teacher's time in the classroom is absolutely kind of one of the critical things that
like, do you think a brand new teacher who's been teaching for 3 or 4 years will know how to control a teaching situation compared to someone who's been there for 15 or 20 years? You're telling me that the person who's maybe been there for 2 or 3 years, yes, it sucks that you lost your job because of seniority, but let me make this point. Because here's the thing. So it's true. The experience of being in the classroom, you learn basically how to kind of deal with students and how to kind of manage the classroom and all that kind of stuff. It's true. That does not mean that every teacher who is who's up on the seniority list and has got tenure is a great teacher. Right? That doesn't mean that. And if you've got a problem with those teachers, that basically the power is there for the current administration to basically, okay, you want to get rid of them, then you start proceedings and you show that your evidence. Here's the evidence you're bringing forward. The thing is that what tenure does is it protects that teacher from arbitrary dismissal. Right? And what this does, so I don't even see this about kind of the experience, and I see this as a power grab. Because basically what they want to do is they want to put all the power in the hands of the administrators and these testing regimes to determine like education, instead of the educational professionals, the teachers themselves who've been trained in how to do this about what's best for our kids. They want to give it to these corporate entities and to the kind of the corporate administrators at the head of these schools. No, yeah, it's just amazing that this is coming up, and I know in college it was different, but when I was at Kutztown University, every semester towards like the 3rd or 4th last week of the semester, you had a faculty coming in who didn't teach the class, passing out papers, asking fill out the Scantron sheets, asking you evaluated your professor. Mm-hmm. You evaluate your lab professor, you evaluate your professor, and I'm sure I don't know if you're able to see these evaluations afterwards, and for the most part, I think we take them seriously. The students, because they have direct results. One semester, we had a lab professor who was absolutely horrible at what he was doing, and pretty much was biased. Giving the good-looking females. There was actually an issue that popped up. Good-looking students better grades when they didn't do the less work, and the people who put 4 or 5 hours into their lab report got D's, and it was marked all in red. And there was this huge disparity happening, and a bunch of students wrote about it in every single lab class that he taught. And what happened next semester? The teacher wasn't there.
Exactly.
I mean, so there are ways of doing this. within the PASHI system. I think that's I don't know if that's a
I'll tell you, all union contracts are like this, right? They basically go through and say, what if you have, especially in education union contracts, when you're talking about tenure, in the contract it's spelled out what are the conditions of employment, right? What are you supposed to do? What are you not allowed to do, right? And that is your kind of, are you fulfilling your obligations or not? That example you gave is a perfect example where the process was followed, right? The administration actually was able to show their evidence, right? And the teacher was kicked out. It's not an absolute 100% perfect system, but that's exactly it. What often happens is that you want administrators who want to say, well, there's nothing we can do. There's nothing we can do because tenure, right? And really all they're saying is like, we really don't want to do our job because it's uncomfortable for us. What we'd rather do is attack unions as a whole so that we don't even have to have this conversation. We can just say, like Donald Trump, you're fired.
Exactly.
So
oh no, go ahead.
No. I'm sorry. I didn't even expect to get so worked up about this today, but I am. I am.
Like I know you know about this firsthand from being a college professor, and you were right now going through a contract fight, pretty much surrounding these things, right? About tenure again, and about adjunct faculty again, and it's the same stuff you were talking about 2 years ago we were in your office, about the stuff you would abscov.
See, and I think about it like this: like if people just think about their own experience getting a job. Okay, so the first thing you do when you get a job, right? Unless especially if you're going to be a teacher, if you're going to be a professor, whatever it's going to be, any job really. The first thing you're doing during that first few years that you're there, yes, you're trying to do a good job, right? You're trying to perform well, right? But you're also want to make sure that you're not pissing off your boss, right? I mean, you want to make sure that you're going to get rehired and you're going to stay on, right? And that's true in higher ed too as well, right? So those first few years, you're going to show all your excitement and all this kind of stuff, but you also might be a little cautious about, you don't want to push the limits too much, right? You don't want to assign things that are too hard for students because then, for example, you might get bad evaluations or something like this, right? Or you want to do something you don't really understand, like what's happened in the past or something like this. But as you're there for a long period of time, you begin to build up some like a history, right? To understand not only kind of what you're doing in the classroom, but understanding how your organization, how your school, how your university works, right? And you know that there's times that, say, the administration is proposing to do something, right, that sounds good, right? And its language, just like this bill, sounds good. But in practice, what it does, right, it makes classes bigger, it makes things harder for students, it cuts off access for students to their faculty members, right, it overworks the faculty members so that they can't concentrate as much on what they should be concentrating on, a whole bunch of stuff like that. And you only get that kind of knowledge, right, through seniority, right? So, teachers, the vast majority of teachers, right? I will never say absolutely everyone, because there's always exceptions in any industry, right? The vast majority of teachers or faculty members are involved with their jobs because they care about education and they care about what they're conveying in the classroom, right? And the thing is part of it is, if you want to defend that situation, if you want to defend the best quality education system possible, then you basically can't constantly be worried about your job. Right? You can't always have to look over your shoulder to see, is the administrator kind of, going to say something bad? Is the administrator not going to like what I'm doing? Or God forbid, I decide to teach something that's difficult for students and they give me bad student evaluation because they didn't like the hard work, right? That's why you have all sorts of evaluations. And what's key to me about what we see in this legislation is that this is not at all about ensuring quality higher education. Otherwise, you wouldn't have freaking boilers exploding in Philadelphia. You'd actually have students would have all the textbooks that they need, and we wouldn't be going kind of crazy. It wouldn't be snowing on them inside the classrooms. It wouldn't be snowing in the classroom like in Reading, right?
Right. There wouldn't be. I mean, let's be honest here. This is the wrong problem. Okay, the problem here is the underfunding of public education. A bunch of Democrats came out and said that. This is a solution. This is a problem. This will only make it worse. And
so really, did we get any Democrats voting for this bill?
Not in the House. Well, in the House, conveniently, back in June, the pro-charter representatives, Margaret Davidson and Wheatley and a couple of other ones, were mysteriously not there for the vote. They did not vote that day on that bill. I guess they didn't want to take that vote into the primary record. They have historically supported charter schools in Philadelphia and Pittsburgh. The Senate, there were no Democrats supported it, and there were a couple of moderate, sane Republicans voting against it. And from Bucks County was one of them, and I think Pat Vance from Cumberland County, who she is now retiring, was the other one who voted against it.
Well, at least we got some of that. Well, it's good to hear at least that the Democrats didn't kind of do what they usually do, is kind of say, well, that sounds good, maybe we should do this, despite whatever PennLive might want to sell them. Crazy. Crazy. Well, listen, we're just coming up to a break right now. Went a little long in the first segment, but sorry, I got so this just gets under my skin, I'll tell you. So when we come back, we're going to talk a little about today's primaries out in Kentucky and Oregon, see what else comes up. And, we'll be right back after this. This is Raging Chicken Radio's Out to Coop podcast. Welcome back to Raging Chicken Radio's Out to Coop podcast. This is Kevin Mahoney, editor and founder of Raging Chicken Press. I'm sitting here once again with Sean Kitchen. Sean, say something's going on over there in the McGinty campaign. What's up?
Yes, it seems like there's been some reshuffle campaign over the past week. Since we last spoke last Tuesday, her campaign director, Mike, and close confidant, Mike Mikas, by someone from Emily's List. Mikas is staying within the campaign, and it's going to be interesting seeing where that goes. A little bit more on that in a couple seconds. But also, it seems like Senate Campaign Committee is dumping dump trucks full of money into this race. Mm-hmm. They've pledged at least $8.2 million to vote for McGinty, which, hey, if she's competent, she might be our next senator. So as long as she's competent, but, she has to be that first. One of the reasons why I look at this thing that's important with Mike Mikas is that I don't agree with what he does. I don't agree with his philosophy, but he's one of these cold-blooded campaign people that you get to run into every so often. Back in 2011, 2012, he was responsible for running this campaign for Richard Fitzgerald, or Rick Fitzgerald, from Allegheny County. He's now a county commissioner, and Fitzgerald was the only county commissioner from the Allegheny area that supported putting a fracking wells in Pittsburgh International Airport, pipeline and natural gas wells under important lakes and waterways in the area. And as we've mentioned in the past, Mike Mikas is also the grassroots AstroTurf campaign called EIS Solutions, where he would create AstroTurf support for natural gas drilling in western Pennsylvania and in the Johnstown area.
So what do you just kind of out of your gut in this one? What do you think this suggests about what's going on in the campaign?
I don't know. I think this is really coming from the Senate Democratic Committee. Mm-hmm. This is coming from Schumer and Reed, that they're really pulling the stops and they want this to win badly. Emily's List is heavily supportive of. They dumped a lot of money into her campaign for the primary win, and now they're installing a Emily's List. One of the campaign directors from Emily's List to run Katie McGinty's. And really, in a year with Donald Trump running for president, having someone from Emily's List running a campaign for a woman senator, a potential woman senator to be, is frankly not a bad idea, considering all the misogynistic shit that's come out of Trump's mouth over the past few months.
Yeah, well, actually,
20 years.
Yeah, no, I would. Well, yeah, exactly. It's I'm actually I'm encouraged that you see the Democratic National Committee and Emily's List is not taking this Pennsylvania fight for granted by dumping that kind of money into this. I mean, I know that, we've been, critical of McGinty's stance, particularly when it comes to a cozy relationship with natural gas and all that kind of stuff. But when you're thinking kind of big picture politics too, you're also talking about, just the numbers of senators in the Senate, right? You're talking about how many Democratic senators you have in the Senate, and that's going to determine whether or not, right, the next president, which, at this point looks like, the Hillary's going to get the Democratic nod. So if Hillary gets it, that if you want to make sure that she's going to be able to get the opportunity to appoint Supreme Court justices, that the Democratic Senate has got to be in place, right? Because I frankly do not trust the Democratic Senate committee, right, or Democratic senators for that matter, to actually play hardball in the way that Republican senators have played hardball with Obama.
And one of the things that it's been really interesting, it seems that it's definitely becoming a point where, you know, with this Emily's List person coming in, you've seen a lot of the Hillary Clinton campaign, a super PAC, and now a couple of other senators running in states around the country have released devastating ads with Donald Trump speaking his mind on women. So it's going to be really interesting seeing the campaign ads that come out in Pennsylvania. Will this drive more men to vote for Clinton, or will this drive more men to vote for Trump? One of the things that's going to be really interesting that should be hit really hard on is Pat Toomey's hypocrisy with the Supreme Court justices. Last week, he tried to rush his federal court nominations through the Senate, and he was called out asking if he would vote for all, including Merrick Garland. He doesn't want to do that. So.
Well, crazy. We'll see what this how this plays out. I think, you know, the Pennsylvania fight promises to be a good one at this point, especially when you're looking at the national polling where they're looking at head-to-head matchups with Hillary and Trump. The Hillary and Trump matchup in Pennsylvania right now it's pretty close, right? That it's, you know, there's some polls that show that Trump may even take Pennsylvania. I mean, we're way early in the process, and there's all sorts of problems with those polls. But to see that you got some folks in the Democratic Party, they're actually going to step up and get behind McGinty to make sure that this seat goes Democratic is encouraging at the very least. So let me ask you this then. So given what I'm going to shift a little bit on you here. But so given that we've got these primaries today, that we've got a primary in Oregon, we've got a primary in Kentucky. In the latest poll in Kentucky, that was done way back in March, and there's been the Clinton campaign has had some fumbles in Kentucky, particularly when it comes to coal. Her saying she's going to shut down coal plants and things like this has pissed off a bunch of people. So we don't know what it is. She was up by 5 points in Kentucky back in March. Where that is today, we're not sure. She, after saying she wasn't going to run ads, now they're back in and they're kind of putting a bunch of big media buy in Kentucky to try to win this. In Oregon, Clinton is up in Oregon too as well. And originally that it seemed like this was going to be a state that was going to be favorable to Bernie Sanders' campaign, except there's some peculiar voting things that are going on up there. So when you're looking at, you know, the race overall today, do you think today really is, make or break for Bernie Sanders?
I'm not sure. I think Sanders has already, signs from the Sanders campaign has shown that he is pushing for the platform now instead of the party nomination. Frankly, believe that Sanders' campaign for president is over. Now it's more of the getting the platform and him sticking around to make sure some of his policies get implemented with Clinton, and maybe pushing for a progressive running mate that can bring in people to the left. Most definitely. It's been really interesting. I think the past couple of weeks we've seen Joe Biden out here floating Elizabeth Warren's name for a VP pick. Yep. He's not out there. This isn't because Clinton's going to get indicted, which some people believe. He's doing this just to float that name out there to get the buzz going of having a Clinton-Warren matchup. And Warren has made the playbook on how to attack Donald Trump without taking his crap, and doing it in such a way on Twitter that no one has seen before.
Yeah, right.
But it'll be interesting to see what's going to happen over the next couple of weeks.
Warren has clearly brought the heat when it comes to Twitter. It's been pretty amazing.
And I frankly worked the other day, patron. I'm thinking he was Republican. Was asking me, do I know who so-and-so was? He was complaining about this, that, and the other. So he asked me, who should Hillary Clinton's VP pick be? And he said a Latino male or a Latino female. And I think Thomas Perez from the Department of Labor would be the perfect pick for that.
So you're not thinking not the Castro, not one of the Castro brothers, but Perez?
I would like Perez.
Alvarez. I'm sorry.
Perez, right? Yes, his name from the Department of Labor.
Yeah.
From the department. I think that would be a nice way to win over unions and Latino voters. Because frankly, the minorities are percentage of the white voting population is dwindling, and they're voting for Republicans, and it's keeping that Obama tent in place, that coalition that he built. And I also think it would be nice having someone who's a lot more liberal than Clinton on the ticket. I think Warren should not take the opportunity to become vice president because she needs to stay in the Senate. She can do a lot more damage inside the Senate than as VP.
I think
a figurehead.
I've heard a few people say this now, and I think I'm with them on this. I think, you know what? I think Elizabeth Warren knows what's the best place for Elizabeth Warren. I think she has shown nothing but the kind of most astute political skills I've seen. If she decides to go for VP, I have confidence that there's a good reason for doing that. She stays in the Senate. I have the same confidence there. The one thing I'm thinking about today's primary is when it comes to the Bernie Sanders campaign is that if Sanders loses both Kentucky and Oregon today, or he doesn't get the kind of 65% victory that he needs, or to kind of at least keep his path for the nomination in play, then the campaign will no longer be able to kind of talk about this narrow path. And I think that it's going to be an interesting move to see what happens and how the campaign is going to shift and start talking to its own supporters. Because, it's been in the news all weekend at the Nevada convention this past weekend. It was chaos, and there were fights that were breaking out on the floor. There were all sorts of claims that the Clinton campaign had kind of fixed the results. The Clinton campaign saying that no, the Sanders supporters, that they just didn't understand the process. I mean, a lot of this kind of back and forth, I'm concerned, like I've said before, that you've got some of the diehard kind of Sandernistas that are just going to kind of walk away from politics. Forget even the vote per se, right? But politics, right? If they start walking away from the political process, then we're going to lose a lot of the momentum from the progressive side.
I don't see that as being a problem, because from my experiences, I've seen these people before. Your Greens and your people who operate outside the party, they're going to walk away anyway. They always do, because it's not their way. And it's this silo mentality, and a lot of these people are going to go back to their silos after that. Frankly, I don't care that they go back to their silos. What I care about is maybe you have that really small percentage of people who get involved in the movement, and they become the organizers and carry on the movement and strengthen the Fight for 15, strengthen the Black Lives Matter movements. That's what I care about with this. Those people, they can go home because they were going to go home anyway, because they always do. And there are these armchair revolutionaries who are on both sides of this issue. With Clinton and Sanders camps, those are the ones fighting. But these armchair revolutionaries who don't get involved in their community, and they're going to go back to that. And what I'm hoping is going to come out of this is the people from our friends, like Brett Banatelli. Shout out to Brett. A couple of my other Facebook friends from the people from Occupy, that they're going to bring in more energized people to carry on the movement. And I think that's what's going to happen. And that's going to be the most important
thing. I really hope it. And what I mean in particular, I think it's a really good point. And I think that there, just like we saw with Occupy, that there's going to be organizers coming out of this process, that there are going to be some of the people that are just going to take their toys and want to go home. I think that's a really good point. What I start thinking about is is the Sanders campaign prepared to help support those emerging sets of organizers and so on. So we'll see going on. I mean, I think it's just going to be interesting play up between now and up until the Democratic National Convention in Philadelphia. So we'll see where that goes. So we're coming up on a break, and when we come right back, we're just going to have a short little blip at the end here. We're going to close it out for the day, and then we're going to turn you over to the interview with Steve Horn on our first expanded podcast here at Out the Coop. This is Kevin Mahoney, Raging Chicken Press. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Raging Chicken Radio's Out to Coop podcast. This is Kevin Mahoney. I'm the editor and founder of Raging Chicken Press. I'm here once again with Sean Kitchen. I just want to give one more plug to remember that this is the first day of our expanded podcast, as promised. Right after I get off the air with Sean, that will be coming right back at you after a break with an interview I did last week on Friday with Steve Horn. And Steve Horn is going to tell us a little bit about the ExxonMobil probe being led by New York Attorney General Eric Schneiderman, looking at ExxonMobil's role in the climate denial industry and the lawyer behind it. So please check that out, and do go over and check out Julia Scheib's piece on following the Verizon strike out there in Lancaster with the Lancaster 15 Now. She's been doing some great work for us over there too as well. So shout out to Julia. And Sean, I understand that you've got a little project you're working on yourself, but I don't know if you want to kind of give a little teaser to folks here or not. But what are you working on here?
Well, next month, a few weeks from now, as I've been telling you off the air, I'm going on vacation. I'm going out to Boulder, Colorado for a couple of nights, and we're going to Yellowstone and stuff like that. But while I'm in Boulder, I will be enjoying the wonderful craft beer industry out there. A bunch of budding and emerging breweries in that small town. And,
huge, right? I mean, they've got, an amazing, they're like some of the pioneers in the craft beer industry.
Oh my God, there's Oscar Blues out there. Avery, Fat Tire, or all New Belgium are all out there. But I'm going to go to some of the smaller ones. And one of the things I'm looking to do is start a podcast, once a month podcast, looking at the craft beer scene in Pennsylvania, starting in July. And I think it's going to be really good. I've been, poking this idea around to some of our customers. Mm-hmm. They're definitely eager to listen to it and help support that. They think it's a great idea. We already got a couple interviews lined up, looking at some local craft brewers, maybe some people you've never really heard of, and also looking at some of the more political or geographical stuff about it. One of my college professors wrote a paper on the and spatial distribution of breweries and around the country in this craft beer boom, and he was cited in the New York Times last year. So we got some pretty interesting things all lined up.
Man, that sounds awesome. And we've been kind of batting around some ideas like this for the last couple of years or so. I am so freaking psyched that you're going to kind of get this off the go. And
again, it's once a month. It's going to be once a month. It allows me to travel to some of these breweries, in Pennsylvania. I would love to, there's, of course, you have Weyerbacher, Trogs, Victory, there's Pizza Boy, obviously. All within the Harrisburg, southeastern part of the state. In Philadelphia, there's Yards. And then there's all these other smaller ones that are emerging. The Chamonix Creek, Free Will, Forest and Maine, Tired Hands. Out in Pittsburgh, there's Brooch Element. There's Fatheads. In Erie, there's Voodoo, Erie Brewing. So there's stuff popping up all around the state, and we really like doing this to look at that and also look at some of the other issues inside the beer industry, what it's like being a female inside a male-dominated industry like this. Is there space for women brewers? So yeah, we got all this stuff planned out, lined up, and it's going to be an awesome experience.
That's awesome. That is awesome. And I'll tell you, if you are subscribed to this podcast, you subscribe to Out to Coop, subscribe to Raging Chicken Radio, you will automatically get this in your feed. You don't need to do anything else. I know that Sean is going to be kind of building it out so that you're able to access this in multiple platforms in the future. It's funny, you just mentioned Fatheads. I had this past week at the I had the first ever. I had a Fatheads IPA, which is just out of this world. It was fantastic.
And they're just distributing in Philadelphia, right? If I'm right.
Yeah, that's what I understand. And there's Spinnerstown Inn, which is out kind of past Quakertown, and they have a great kind of craft beer setup on tap. And they had this one fresh. It was absolutely fantastic. So, as kind of looking ahead towards this podcast and so on, so maybe you can give us a little bit of a teaser by maybe recommending a PA-based craft beer that you think is especially good right now that people should go out and try.
Well, since I'm extremely biased towards Pizza Boy because I work at Al's at Hampton. I would say Pizza Boy's Eternal Sunshine. Either it's a sour ale. It's really nice, easy drinking. It's a golden sour. It's dry hopped. It's 5% alcohol. I kicked the keg last night while I was at the bar. I had the last 4 beers in that keg, and I saw it was on tap. And that, or the one that zested with grapefruit. It's literally like drinking a sour grapefruit soda.
Nice. Well, and I personally vouch for that too, as well, as Sean was good enough to kind of grab me a couple of bottles of that at one point. I'll tell you, it's absolutely fantastic. So shout out to Pizza Boy and all the Eternal Sunshine fans.
It's always sunny in our lives.
That's right. Exactly. All right. Well, this is about going to do it for today's edition of the Raging Chicken Radio's Out to Coop podcast. I want to thank Sean once again for joining us and kind of being, part of this endeavor to really expand the reach of progressive activist media here in Pennsylvania and beyond. So thanks again, Sean.
Thank you very much. Looking forward to next week.
All right, man. We'll talk to you then. We are out.
Talk to you later.
Bye.